rapid rise of generative AI has ignited revolution across every industry. Companies that execute poorly or without proven framework will find themselves at a critical disadvantage. In 2024, it's time to turn interest into action. Today, I'm joined by Vlad Lukic, Global Leader for Tech and Digital Advantage at Boston Consulting Group. Welcome, Vlad.
Great to see you.
As we begin 2024, senior technology leaders in every poll, including some great research by BCG, has shown that this is high on everybody's list. How high is generative AI as a transformative technology compared to some of the other technologies?
Whichever poll you do, and we're doing a lot of them, and whichever conversation you have, you end up in the following numbers. 70 to 90% of all the executives say it is in their plans for 2024. They're budgeting money, they're deploying teams, they're hiring, they're not slowing down. So it's not 10 to 20% of the folks are showing interest. It is 70 to 90% of them are planning to double down and lean in this space and figure out how to, what makes sense, what's a shiny object versus what is real, and how do they actually deploy it in their organizations for two reasons. One, to delight their customers and create new experiences and deliver their product and services in an effective way. And then second one, to figure out how to put it in their operations to be faster, leaner, more efficient.
You mentioned that in companies that you're working with, there tends to be a sort of a split attitude about how best to approach implementing generative AI. Can you talk a little bit about what that split is?
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's a lot of the companies want to move quickly and get access to the technology. It becomes a catalyst where the conversations are on, is our data ready? What do we need to clean up if needed? How do we create the right data stack so that we can access the data in the right way? How do we put the right governance in place? How do we teach folks how to use this? How do we change incentives in the specific workflow so people are using the technology? All that takes time. At the same time, they want to be cautious and make sure they're putting the right guardrails, which you can envision results in fascinating conversations, right? How do we keep moving and how do we keep testing and building the muscle and getting ready for this while being cautious to not put out into the live access, right? Things that we potentially cannot control fully. And it's, for me, like the biggest lesson that I have is not shying away from those conversations and actually creating forums where you can have this debate and have the conversations. Where companies get in trouble is when they do either of the two extremes. We're not going to do anything until things are figured out. Well, then the downside is you just spent time waiting while you could have been building muscles. On the flip side, if you just rush and put things out there without the guardrails, lawsuits, all kinds of negative things can happen. So you just need to create forum where we can have those conversations and jointly prioritize and sequence the events.
If we had to generalize about the benefits that organizations that you're working with are looking for by implementing and scaling Gen AI on an enterprise scale, what are some of, let's say, the top three there that people are looking for?
What we're seeing is really three buckets of activities. The first one being just deploying. So the co-pilots, the assistant tools, the assistant agents to people that are doing the work in the field. For example, folks in the call centers, or if you're in the sales function and you need to generate 50 emails to different customers that are each all custom based on the data in the CRM. Then the second one is reshaping the whole function. So if I can now do a task that took me 2 days and I can do it now within an hour, what do I do with the other remaining 12 hours that I just freed up? How do I rethink the whole workflow? Can I redeploy the team to do other pieces of it, right? And then the third one is, are there some different services I can provide? Can I offer something at a fraction of a price because of this, or can I offer completely new services that are real time? So depending on the company, et cetera, the answer is going to be the portfolio of those plays. And like for me, the balance is, where does that money come from, right? Because we're not talking about small amounts, right? And there are a few tricks there. One is where companies get in trouble is when they focus on efficiencies, they book the benefits, they put it in the bottom line, and this is now part of the budgets going forward. Well, hold on, before you do that, take some of that money to fund some of the more complex plays that require funding. So before this becomes part of your go-forward new margin structure, redeploy some of that freed up capacity and cash and invest it into some of these plays that will require investments. Because if you don't do that, you've just had great return on investment on a few of these initiatives, but there's no way to fund now the ones that will have big payback, but require time and patience. So
one of the big questions that I've been, and I think probably a lot of people are dealing with is how do you get this, how do you manage the costs without strangling innovation?
here we're getting into consumption. When you use Gen AI, you're spinning up a lot of compute capacity at the same time. So it becomes actually an extra cost. And so managing that is pretty hard. And so that's a new moment, both in pricing. The pricing is going to evolve. So how do you manage for the cost of the Gen AI when you know for a fact it's going to evolve, not in the next year or two, but every 3 to 6 months as the companies are figuring out their pricing model. So that uncertainty is part of the equation here, and how do you think through that, right? And then the other part is some of the companies got in trouble by deploying it where it's not needed, but it's very expensive. For example, some of the first wave of applications is knowledge management. Can you use the ChatGPT or whichever of the generative AI providers you prefer to retrieve some of the data from a lot of the data sources you have? That is a very expensive way to do data management and access your data. So there are different ways to go after some of the solutions that might be less expensive than what generative AI can do well. Fascinating observation for me now being in the consulting world for the last 15 plus years is the memory loss is fascinating because the organization changes so fast. Obviously, we're going to revisit the costs and the contracts a year and a half from now or a year from now and look, how do we reshape them, etc., right? Well, you go back a year later, like the whole team is gone. They were doing really well. They got promoted into different roles. They're now new folks that just say, well, this is what was agreed on. This must be right. And they just stay with it. Similar thing was with the cloud, right? So the really critical muscle that I'm working with my clients to build is how do you keep revisiting this on a regular frequency? And what is it? Is it 3 months, 6 months? Is it yearly? And is it scheduled? Is it budgeted? Are you guys going to get together and revisit this? Right? The intuition is not built yet, right? And then they just get surprised when a few years, 2-3 years down the line, they're signing again a big check and they don't know what drove it.
What are some of the other operational challenges and strategic challenges of companies looking to embed, imbue, marble Gen AI across not only individual functions, but key business processes and new product offerings? What are some of the gotchas here?
Yeah, so it's a huge range of them. So let's try to unpack a few of them. One is just purely experience and the talent that can do this, right? We were not talking about generative AI broadly as the business community until January, February of 2023. Right now, it's pretty much in every single conversation. So you can imagine when you get in the conversation and when we are deploying something and the question is like, okay, who has done it now 5 times and know that this is bulletproof and it works? No one raises a hand, right? So it's a new thing. And at the same time, how many hours a day do you have extra sitting around for you to just spend time learning and educating yourself? And then put that in the middle management or executives that are on the plane all the time. It is hard, right? So it's talent that knows this stuff becomes a big obstacle. 70-80% of when we do the surveys, etc., of the executives say, this is my biggest problem. The second one is even when you have them and you have the technical team and technical solution and you have the folks that know how to manage them, you're now in the process of deploying it. You got to change incentives. You got to get people to do things in a different way. I have a great example from a client where we deployed a bunch of generative AI tools with their workforce, and they were not using them. And I said, are they not good? They're like, no, it's fantastic. Oh, but why aren't you using it? And they said, well, my incentive is to do different tasks. And then the third one I would say is, I have wonderful examples where we come in and the task that took 10 hours can now be done in 30 minutes or less, right? And we have example after example where that is the case. So tremendous efficiencies and gains. But then you look at the full process, this thing was never a bottleneck, right? And so I'm doing it faster, etc., but it doesn't change the outcome. The whole task still takes 10 days. So it's great that it just freed up an individual's time to potentially do some other things, but it didn't change the outcome overall. And the companies, if they don't frame the problem statement the right way and they manage the whole end-to-end workflow, a lot of the efficiencies and gains and the benefits of using some of these tools just evaporate.
Are there any particular concerns and issues that a CIO and IT leaders ought to be tuned into?
So if I'm a CIO or CTO, right, in a large organization right now, a few things. One is the budgets for this are not going to magically appear. So you got to manage your costs and what you're doing and make sure that you find out where you have waste and redeploy it towards some of these solutions would be one of the topics. The second one is have a clear point of view on where some of these things are going to create value so it can be articulated and captured. We had an example of if you deliver some of the efficiencies, but they really don't change the outcome, it was essentially wasted money. The third one is around data. This is as classic as it gets, but garbage in, garbage out, like this is where it's coming to life. We have a lot of companies that are hoping also Gen AI will help them eliminate their data problems. Well, if I need 3 years of data for something at a specific level of frequency, I still need 3 years and data collected at that level of granularity. If I don't have that, I can't do some of the things. So having the right conversations around data, at what level of granularity, frequency, etc., and how do we access it in the right way remains a huge priority for the companies to figure out if you're a CIO or CTO. And then the last one is think through the responsible component of all of this and how do you manage that. You're not in a silo. Like this needs to be business-led. Business process owners or business leaders need to own the outcomes here, and you need to deeply engage with them, which then solves a lot of the other things. What's going to be the value that we're going to create? Who are we going to focus on? And they give you the true north so that when you're building the tech stack and the technology, you know what you're building it for and for which outcomes.
Well, we're going to stop here. Thanks, Vlad, very much. Great conversation.
It was a pleasure.
And thank you for watching. For more stories about the tech revolution, subscribe to our newsletter and check out our other VB in Conversation videos at VentureBeat.com.